welcome again. Thanks a lot for accepting this interview with us. Must say I'm really honored to have you since you are the actual founder of Walsh Whiskey, so as the name says actually, and you founded it with your wife Rosemary. And the fact is, what hit me is that you decided to found the Walsh Whiskey when actually Irish whiskies wasn't exactly in a very good shape. So what actually prompted you to take this decision?
Yeah, it's Listen, first of all, lovely to be with you, Alberto, and your audience. Listen, it's an honor anytime to speak with friends in Italy and friends of Irish whiskey. When I started, I can tell you, Irish whiskey. There were three distilleries on the island. Now there's 38, and if you go back 100, 150 years ago, there was a hell of a lot more whiskey distilleries on the island, whiskey companies, whiskey brands. Um, it was big business in the 1700s and 1800s in Ireland. Unfortunately, in the 20th century, Irish whiskey fell off a cliff for many reasons, and we can go into that later if you want. I'm sure you've covered it in previous interviews, but it fell off a cliff. So when I arrived on the scene, I can't say that people were crying out for Irish whiskey. Um, I can tell you, as part of my getting going in the business, going into bars, whether here in Dublin or in Boston and in the United States, and saying, I want to talk to you about Irish whiskey. I have, and before I got the words out of my mouth, say, no, I have my Irish whiskey. We have one. It's there. So you won? Yes, it's there. That was it. Close shop. Bye bye. Whereas now, people are looking for that depth, and the back bar is full of not just Scotch, not just bourbons, but Irish whiskey. So the landscape has changed hugely. For me, it was more, let's call it a calling, because um, my background, I'm a farmer's son, my wife's a farmer's daughter. I come from like in Italy, a small Irish family of 9 kids, and the oldest stayed on the home farm, and that's absolutely correct. My brother's a great farmer, and the rest of us are educated and put out into the world. Luckily for me, my education involved computer science, and as part of that, I worked in technology, had a fantastic time out in the world, and I guess 16 years traveling the world with this fantastic skill and just broadened my horizons. But I kept coming back to the land where I was brought up, and I kept coming. I distinctly remember as part of my work, traveling in France, traveling in Italy, and spending my time off going to vineyards, and just loving that whole, where you take that grape from the vine and turn it into this beautiful liquid called wine. For me, our grape is barley, our wine is whiskey, and that was my draw always to go back. And so went back with my wife. We said, listen, we had an opportunity, so we went back home, and we started out in a whiskey and liqueur business. It was a bit of fun. We did not know where it would take us. And I can't say, sitting here 22 years later, Lamberto, that this was the vision, and that we had and have a lot of passion for Irish whiskey, for the culture here and everything great about Ireland and the land, and that was the starting point. And it really went from there. But it was, simple things, knocking on doors, talking about Irish whiskey. There was no demand from the consumer, from the bar, from the trade. So it was an uphill push to say, try, listen. Because what really got me going, Lamberto, was we looked back. We did a lot of research. We immersed ourselves in Irish whiskey. We saw in the records, and I was fortunate to spend time with Irish distillers down in Middleton and see um, how big Irish whiskey was, and the breadth and depth of it, and the recipes and the flavour, how flavoursome Irish whiskey was and must have been in the 1800s versus in 1999. And in 1999, when we came into it, Irish whiskey was a very simple stream. When I talked to people about Irish whiskey, they said, yes, love it, very simple, smooth, easy whiskey. Irish whiskey should be complex. Should be there should be waves and flavors. There should be the flavor profile should be this wide. And so we saw it as part of our job is to try and broaden out the flavour profile of Irish whiskey and just help in that renaissance. And we're part of it. We're not solely responsible for quite sure, but we are part of this movement.
Yes, but you were among the first anyway. Okay, now
We,
there are many, names, new labels, as you said. They keep growing actually the
yeah,
numbers. But you were anyway one of the first when, as you said, nobody actually believed in it. Even because you said something quite funny, because when I started drinking whiskey and approaching it, when talking to other people, they always say, Irish whiskey is that simple, straight thing, triple distilled, there's nothing very fancy, drop it, don't even care about it. And
yeah,
I'm talking about the 6 to 7 years ago. So at the beginning, myself, I was kind of skeptical with the Irish whiskey. When I started drinking it by myself, I said, "What the hell? No, that's not true. Absolutely, of course, there are simple whiskies, but it's not like
yes,
it's a strike that Irish whiskey is that. It's like Scotch whiskey is this and bourbon it is. Actually, no, because even in Scotland, even the it's all blurring. It's not no more Campbelltown. Once upon a time, you said Campbelltown is that kind of whiskey. It's not true
yes,
anymore. So I believe
yeah.
even Irish whiskey, in a way, it's not the same thing. So what you did actually is very important.
Yeah, I could almost say the same for wine. You come from a wine country. When growing up, it was French wine, and for in our part of the world, the Italians hadn't arrived with wine, and we boxed off Italian as this, but actually Italian is wow, and the regions and the flavors and so there's a whole discovery there. It's the same in whiskey, and I'd love Alberto someday that Ireland get to the stage where Scotch is where you do have that regionalisation. I would love that development because of course it would have happened in the 1800s and 1700s where you know whiskey out of Wexford or Cork tasted so different to something out of Donegal or Belfast, and that's sort of known. And also, there would have been a very distinct difference between maybe what you might call Dublin whiskey, which was the big commercial capital in the 1800s, versus the regions and whiskey from the hills, so to speak. So part of that, protecting Irish whiskey in the 1800s, and it was around that quality issue. So the move to triple distillation, the move away from peated whiskies, was almost to protect that quality because non-peated triple distilled was a more sophisticated whiskey back then, and that was sort of a protectionism, and it worked well to help sort of create that brand Irish whiskey. So now we're starting out again. We have a blank sheet of paper, and we've been encouraging more people to come into this industry to practice and to because again when we started out there was nobody to turn to, and now we've got an association, whiskey association, which is there to protect, to promote, and support. Absolutely vital. I had nobody to turn to when I started, so we made the mistakes. We made every mistake you could make.
Now, of course, but
I'm sitting here. Sorry, you can't see this, but I've got part of I've got two glasses which I've got the answer. You can't see them, but one is sort of clear and one is fuzzy, right? Well, this is part of the mistakes you make. The fuzzy one tastes great, but I can't put it on the shelf because you will think it's something wrong.
I know, which is why that's all another the chill filtration and the coloring that sometimes some do in the whiskey just to make it more palatable for the great public. Even that it's kind of you see you enjoying it anyway.
Ah, it's part of my job. Thursday is a very important day. Just in case your viewers don't know that this is Thursday here. So Thursday I taste a lot.
Okay, that's only on Thursday though.
Only Thursday.
Absolutely, sure. But what I was wondering is basically your company is a family-based company because basically it started with you and your wife.
Yeah.
How hard is it to keep it real? I mean, now there is a moment of great globalization. There are great companies. There are conglomeration that are taking, even because the whiskey market is constantly changing. How hard it is to still fit in your place?
Well, it's easy on one way. It's easy because our point of difference is, we're not Campari, we're not Pernod Ricard. We're, if Walsh Whiskey, a family business here in Ireland, creating very unusual and amazing tastes, and getting that out and spreading the word. So that's if you like, a unique selling point for us, and it's something that we have to capitalize on. I think the smart global leaders
Hmm.
in the spirits business, in the whiskey business, will see that they do need to, when they acquire, for example, a smaller artisan business, they need to keep that flame alive. And the trick is how, in doing that. So it is difficult for them, but for us, it's something. It helps us stand out, and it's so much easier when it's a family business, because we're passionate about this. This is what we do. This is what puts the bread on the table. Very simple, you know.
Of course.
Yeah. So I and there are cycles. What led to, in 1999, there were no real arts and craft. There was a starting in that, all right, but there was nothing there, because for the previous century you had this mothballing and uh, consolidation in an industry. So it all ended up, well, 95% of it ended up in one firm. And to be honest, they did a good job in keeping the thing alive. Uh, but then the natural way for that to progress is for fragments to break off, and then for the young generation, which was myself back then, the young generation to come along and to create something afresh again. And there are cycles in the whiskey business. We've seen it in Scotland many times. We see it here in Ireland. So now is the time for expansion in that, broadening out the flavor profile, that can only happen with the young guns. Because, just to give you an example, when we started, there was no cask strength Irish whiskey available commercially. None, zero. We were and it's sinful. We were the first to create cask strength Irish whiskey for the Irishman and for Riders Tears back in 2008. Up to then, commercially available in my lifetime, no cask strength Irish whiskey. That can't be right. But anyway, so now, of course, there is a great urgency, and loads of people, including the big guys, producing cask strength whiskies, and that's great. That's what we do. We prod and we poke, and the others will look. And likewise, we're learning from some of the new guns as well. And so the industry needs the young whiskey companies, whether it's in blending, whether it's in distillation. They need us to be experimenting, and that's what we're finding. So no longer is it just a straight recipe,
Hmm.
but there are nuances now. And while typically Irish whiskey is triple distilled, and that's what we've got to know and love, it doesn't mean it should be. It can be double distilled. Why can't it be peated? Yes, it can. And maybe some of the big firms are already fixed in their view of the world, so they can't really pivot to something like a peated whiskey readily. So, but a smaller company can, and that's what we're seeing happening.
Yes, indeed. But so when you created your two labels, which is Writer Tears that we see on your back, and the Irishman, what were you concentrating more on? The casks, on the original flower from the original whiskey? What was your search for? Your profile, your personal profile. What were you looking more?
I suppose so. Again, learning from the past, learn well, what made Irish whiskey great, and that wonderful taste. Back in the 1800s, it was all about two styles. One style stood out very much prominent, which was pot still Irish whiskey, but also malt. So whiskies distilled in a copper pot. And while an Irishman, patented column distilling, and it was a savior for the Scottish in blending Scottish whiskey to make it that much more palatable and enjoyable. Um, the Irish stuck at this pot and malt because it was just you know I would just say it was a big bodied whiskey. It was just, this is a big bodied whiskey. Whiskey's coming from the pot. Um, I was struck by a few things. One, in Ireland, the the blend of the day was that pot malt combine. We refer to it as a sort of a champagne blend. So pot still and malt uh, blended, just a wonderful taste. So I wanted to rediscover some of that, and that is what we've done with Riders Tears, which is that single pot led blend with single malt. Also, for me, the DNA for Walsh whiskey is that recreation of the pot malt combined, along with casks that would have been used back then. So in Scotland, they've tried everything, and you can get anything. But when we started out, you know, looking for an Irish whiskey finished in a cognac cask didn't exist. As in, nobody was doing it, wasn't available. Why? Back in the 1800s, up until 1860, most casks used in Ireland would have come out of Europe, typically France, French oak, and typically Spain. You saw France being the cognacs and some of the wines. In Spain, the fortified wines, especially the sherries. But a lot of that, when I came to the business, thinking of a sherried malt, I'm thinking of Scotch. Uh, I'm not thinking Irish. So wanting to recreate and use those traditional casks because in Ireland we moved very much into the bourbon territory after the 1860s, and it is the bread and butter barrel for any Irish whiskey today. So so the DNA with the pot malt, and then layering on casks and experimenting with casks, and we have even sorry in Ireland we have one little extra edge over our Scottish cousins because we can work with any wood. It doesn't have to be oak. Now, Lamberto, I can tell you there's a good reason why we use oak, but uh, but you can experiment with other
Yes,
woods,
of course, of course.
and that leads to fun and different tastes. And even within oak, we've done some really interesting experiments with Mizunara oak, for example, which complements our Irish Tears really well because of the spicy note we get from the pot still, and then layer on that oaky spice the extra one you're going to get from the Mizunara oak. Unfortunately, Mizunara oak is more porous, so losses are.
The angel share is quite big.
Don't talk to my accountant. He's not happy about this, right?
Okay, okay, we won't.
But the taste is super. And these are all really interesting experiments we're basing it in the past, but trying to translate it for today.
Oh, that's good. In fact, the fact that you join tradition with innovation, it's something you think that it's something that you need. I mean, right now Irish whiskey is blooming, and probably some say it will eventually surpass the Scotch whiskey. Probably. You think in this, so innovation and research is very important as much as is tradition. I mean, because you don't have to lose the way. You keep innovating, but keeping an eye on your back, so to speak.
Yes, exactly. You need to do both. We don't. Of course, we're excited about the challenge with our Scottish cousins that someday we might surpass them. But that's in the future. We have a lot of work to do. They produce amazing whiskies and they're doing wonderful, and we take a lot of inspiration from them. So that's super. So we have to do our own thing, and like what I'm tasting here, it just came out of a barrel today for me to taste, and like this was it in the barrel, so it's quite murky, but it tastes wonderful. It's very very creamy, and the cask it's a peated red ale cask. Now this is totally off the charts. A peated red ale cask. It came out of Dingle in Kerry, and it's just an experiment, but the taste is wow. I get that lovely ale taste in it. There's a sweetness and so we have to try this. There will be a lot of casualties both in the barrels that don't make it, and also unfortunately in business. Some of the whiskey companies will come and go, and that's part of the ebb and flow of growing the category. But we do need to push the boundaries out and Irish whiskey and Riders Tears in particular and the Irishman in particular, they're offering something different.
Mhm. Yes, of course, that's important. But you think that, for example, there is another thing. One of your colleagues in Ireland is working a lot about the terroir, because even you said before the wine. After all, there are the grapes and there are the wines, then there are the cereals and there is the whiskey. You think it's actually a thing, the terroir in whiskey, or is just a kind of a narrative? A very interesting and very poetic narrative, but that's it.
Okay. Um, uh, for sure, listen, the terroir, of course, is part of the narrative, is part of the story. And like in wine, it has an influence.
Hmm.
Absolutely has an influence. But if you know everything that, so you've got the terroir has an influence, the distillation method has an influence, uh, the treating of the malting process has an influence, the yeast has an influence, the fermentation cycle, the length of the fermentation, all has the spirit cut has an influence. The barrel has a huge influence. So the great thing about Irish whiskey traditionally being, if you think of Irish whiskey as predominantly triple distilled, it's not all triple distilled, but predominantly triple distilled. It is, for me, it's like having a broad palette we're painting here, and we have got the best palette because here we have a liquid that's really open to be influenced. Now, pick the cask. So we are trying and working with many different types of casks, and the music you can play, the pitch you control is just phenomenal. It's incredible. So all the way along the journey, you're getting influence. Terroir for sure, but things can be lost. So I can kill the terroir taste, or I can kill the distillate taste by putting it into a first fill bourbon barrel. Bing. Okay. So it's how you treat it and how you look after it. And we all, some people will make the narrative about the terroir, and I love that story because I'm a farmer at heart and I absolutely love it. When we started in our business, the first thing I did actually with my wife Rosemary is that we grew 35 acres of barley just to go through the process from seed to harvest to bringing it to the malting house. And anyway, in the end, we say we barely washed our faces with it because it broke even. We made no money out of it, but it was a very interesting project just to learn from it, and
Hmm.
we wanted to do it as farmers. And I love that, but it doesn't pay the bills.
No, of course not. But if your hands were totally free, I mean, no regulation, you can do whatever you want with your whiskey, just experiment as free as you want. Is there something like, your secret dream you would like to try with a whiskey, but the actual rules can't allow you to?
Um, Well, okay, as you know, for Irish whiskey, we have a GI, just like Scotland has, just like champagne has cognac, and I believe in that. If you, because I believe, yes, we have rules and regulations, but if you want to grow something of worth, then there's a lot of value in that, and so let's say I believe in that. If I want to create something outside of those rules,
Hmm.
I can, but I can't. I may not call it Irish whiskey. I'll call it whiskey.
Hmm.
It of course can be product of Ireland, but I'll call it whiskey, and that's up to me to do. So you know, like I was really keen to develop a an organic single pot Irish whiskey, and just to see again my farming roots and believing in the land. And I had the pleasure of being able to do that back in 2017 to actually distill and create a pot still. And the taste for me, and I know natural wine is big now in Italy, and but the taste was wow. So this is it's there's nothing available commercially yet. But if you said to me, you've got carte blanche, go to, that's where I'd spend my days happily tasting and sampling, and just that lovely natural organic. So organic barleys, yeah, wonderful.
Oh, Okay. So you think, as you said before, because in every part of the process, you are adding something, and what you had in the previous process somehow gets blended in everything. So you're talking about a rare, but you think the organic barley actually gives you, a big start in the flavor composition of the whiskey.
In our experiment, that's what we found.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so I was amazed by the, and we often refer to it in Irish whiskies when we're talking about pots, about sort of a creamy note, but
Hmm.
that real heavy layer, it was a very, very big taste, creamy note. I loved it in the organic pot. So yeah, I love that, those big Irish whiskies, and that's where we need to get back to. We need to be giving you, Lamberto, a challenge, and sort of say, taste it. And every time you taste it, you, wow, I'm finding this is just a wonderful discovery each time you drink it. I didn't notice that sort of peach note coming through, you know.
Hmm. Yes, but in fact, what when I approached the first time, Writer Tears was the first one that I tried. What amazed me that is that you started with premium whiskies. I mean, you don't premium whiskey at a very affordable price because you have this. Yes, when I started talking with someone, like, how can this be premium whiskey if it doesn't cost as a premium whiskey?
Yeah, yeah.
So this was, I mean, this is a great choice. Why you made this choice? I mean, it's to make it more available for because you wanted more people to taste it. It's a precise choice, marketing choice.
Yeah, just probably two things. One, I knew straight away at the beginning, well, not only was I not interested in the value segment, the standard segment, and I wasn't, which was primarily based around grain blends.
Hmm.
So grain or corn whiskey blended with a bit of pot, a bit of malt, or whatever. It did nothing for me as a taste. It's not something I like, and also the big firms. This is their bread and butter. This is what they do on a daily basis. Well, I have no business being in there. But what I wanted to do was be able to add value in terms of the quality, add something extra to the whiskey, and give something extra to our consumers and the fans for Riders Tears and the Irishman. So each and every whiskey expression you get from us, we're giving more than the price on the bottle.
Hmm.
In fact, I think it was the Chicago Beverage Tasting Institute gave the Irishman Founders Reserve, which is one of the highest malt content in an Irish blend. It gave it, number one, it gave it a very high rating points, but it said it was the best pound for pound, the best value Irish whiskey out there, even though it was say 35 euros, and whereas maybe the mainstream was at 20 euros, we were at 35. But for what was in the bottle, it was, it's a wow. So
Hmm.
we're always trying to give more, whether it is like our 17-year-old. It was voted in 2019 best Irish whiskey by our peers here in Ireland, and we're really proud of that. And we, our RRP, our recommended retail price for it was in around 90 euros. But after it won that, the retailers here just said, no, we're putting it up to 120. I said, no, we want to give value, like, so yeah, we're happy with it. We're making decent margin, we're making
Hmm.
decent, we're happy with it, but don't always give a little bit more, give something back to the consumer so they're getting really good value.
That's interesting because not many, especially now that there are so many, there are so many limited editions, single cask editions, or even standard edition. But just the fact they are new, they start with a very high price. Even if actually there are many bottles around, but they just even it's part of the narrative. If it costs a lot, it means it must be very good in some way.
So, and I remember, that it's part of the growing pains that we have in Ireland as part of the industry. So, yes, there are some silly prices being asked for maybe just ordinary whiskey, but that will wash out over time because you and your listeners and our consumers, they'll learn that with some, they'll taste and they'll say, okay, well, it's a good whiskey. It's not worth 300 euros. It's not. It's 75 euros. That's in my so. But ourselves and there's some other young companies in Ireland who are trying to give that value and not overcharge. And we will help get that level right. Just give good, always quality, 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 and don't overcharge.
Yes, but what do you think it are the risks of this blooming new Irish whiskey era? I mean, because everybody is like saying, okay, now Irish whiskey is selling, so I think there are many people just very excited to come into the market. You think that would be a risk, like the bar risk to go lower, or is something that, as you said, that the market at one point will find its now I missed the word in English, but anyway, will find its
We'll find its
equilibrium.
level. We'll find its
Exactly.
level. Yeah. So uh, yeah, there's a risk. The big risk is quality. So that people take shortcuts because you have, people from the outside of the industry looking in thinking, okay, I can make a quick buck here.
Mhm.
This is a rising industry, I'll get involved. So there's always that challenge. So the quality is really the only risk because everything else would sort itself out. Unfortunately, through COVID, and we talk about, some people will not survive the long-term impacts of COVID, especially if they're only starting out, because whiskey is a long. I've been at it 22 years. It's a lot of my life in it, but in whiskey terms, it's very short. So if you're getting involved, this is a long-term business generally. So that's the first thing. So what we need to do as part of the Irish Whiskey Renaissance is ensure quality. Um, the Whiskey Association, and I was involved, one of the founding members in 2014, setting that up, and it had three remits: uh, you know, uh, protection of the quality of the liquid produced was absolutely critical. And that's why you have a technical file. Yes, you can go and knock yourself out and create all sorts of wonderful concoctions, but if it's outside of Irish whiskey definition, then don't call it Irish whiskey, call it Lamberto's whiskey produced in Ireland. And that's fine. And we do, I have some great fun doing that. Uh, but within Irish whiskey, there are a few rules and regs. It's there's plenty of there's huge the permutations, and I worked it out. There was about 2 million permutations. If you in Irish whiskey, we have got more categories than the Scottish. We can use more woods. There's just and in terms of the recipes, there is plenty of room there for experimentation. Yeah.
No, I see. Yeah, that's interesting. And I was thinking about one of your two labels. The Irishman. In a way, its name says it all. In a way, Writer's Tears is how. Even because I know that recently you're supporting a project for a movie based on the women that helped publish the Ulysses from Joyce. So in a way, Writer's Tears is straighten the tie with books. Is that what you had in mind when you actually created the label?
Okay. When there was two sides to the story here. So back in the 1800s, when we did our research, we were looking and seeing what was going on. We saw that the pot and the malt were the two anchors for Irish whiskey, and for me, I saw on one side malt. Our friends in Scotland have done a wonderful job over the last 40 years, in particular, building that malt category from out of the Scotch blending. Now you had this wonderful single malt Scottish, and the Irish really hadn't got there. So this was malt was there was definitely a role for me to do something on malt, but malt for me was very traditional,
Hmm.
and the Irishman brand represents and focuses on the malt and is very traditional in look and feel. So that's where the Irishman, and then on the single pot side, it was a little bit more edgy because pot really, other than one or two brands, had virtually disappeared from the Irish landscape over the last century. So it was a bringing back of that. And also in the early 2000s, I was very much influenced by what was happening in bourbon, that bourbon revolution. I spent a bit of time in Kentucky and other places over there, and I really loved what was going on. And in one way, almost disrespect for the old traditions in terms of the namings of the whiskies and the bottles that they would put them in. So here we have Riders Tears, which is very different to a traditional Irish whiskey. It's not called, Glen or Barley, or it's got, its name is very different, and the look and the taste. The whole thing was to be just outside the box. We're Irish, but we're outside the box, and it was part of a global whiskey revolution. And with Writer's Tears, I suppose the story chimed well. In the 1800s, we had this golden era for Irish whiskey, but we also had a golden era for Irish literature.
Hmm.
So great writers, James Joyce, you mentioned, Yeats, George Bernard Shaw, Oscar Wilde, Sam Beckett.
Hmm.
This island was just bubbling between literature and whiskey, between scribe and distilling. It was just an electric place to be. And you've been to Dublin, and some of the pubs in Dublin, you see a plaque on the doors or the wall saying this is where James Joyce would hang out. This is where Bean or Yeats or the various characters would go maybe to sip a whiskey and to watch life go by.
Hmm.
And there's a story told that they could be there for an hour, a day, a week. Nobody knew, but the only thing they knew is that when they cried tears of whiskey. So we adopted that a little story. Yeah. So, and I suppose with Writer's Tears, we are appealing to the creative in you,
Hmm.
in our fans out there. It's whether it's writing or whether it's singing or art in general. And I love your logo, Whiskey Art. So it's appealing to the artists, really.
Yes. Yes, because I believe when I chose the name, actually, that's what the reason, because I believe that whiskey is an art itself, from who makes it, and as all art is something personal. Because I mean, of course, there is a difference between good art and bad art. Let's say, but actually, it's what you make of it, is
Yeah.
how you approach it. Because whiskey tells something different to any one of us. Because you can
Yeah.
find something that it's only yours inside that
Yeah.
bottle, inside that drum. And it's like going back to the literature, in a way, what you find when you read a book. Because even a book has its story, its characters, but in a way, you connect to yourself what you read. As when you drink whiskey, it's exactly the same thing. So I was fascinated by the choice of the name, and when I read about the news about you supporting the movie about James Joyce's book, I find it's a very nice, because you're creating an actual connection, which is just not only the name; it's an actual
Yeah.
connection.
And Lamberto, a couple of years ago, well, first of all, for your viewers and listeners to know that 16th of June,
Hmm.
the 16th of June is Bloomsday,
Hmm.
and it's a special every year. The 16th of June is a celebration of all things about Ulysses and James Joyce.
Hmm.
And in Dublin, they recreate, because Ulysses is about that one day in Dublin back in 1904, when Leopold Bloom goes walkabout in Dublin, and it's following that. So there's a recreation of that walk, and people dress up maybe in Victorian style, and uh, but one of the venues on that route, and Mr. Bloom calls into Sweeney's pharmacy or chemist
Hmm.
back in 1904. That's a real, and every place he calls it is an actual place in Dublin. It's real. It's not made up. It's not fictitious. So the Sweeney pharmacist existed right up until 2009 when the pharmacist was about to close. And then some Joycean enthusiasts took it over and
Hmm.
kept it exactly as it was. So it looks the same inside, all the same wood and the worn counters and the lovely tincture bottles. Instead of maybe medicine now on display, it's a bookshop where they read. Joyce is read every day
Hmm.
without fail. Something from Ulysses. People from around the world, whether it's Italy or Brazil, just drop in and they can take part in this reading. And it's a very simple place in terms of it's a one room. But unfortunately, they ran into a problem, I think, with the landlord who was trying to increase the rent and they didn't have the funds. These were volunteers. So we've stepped in to help them pay their rent and to keep this because it's just a wonderful landmark. And yeah, so we've a lot of work that we're doing around that whole Joycean project. Of course, next year
Hmm.
is the 100th anniversary.
Hmm.
So, Lamberto, expect to hear from us with some nice projects on that.
Yes, I know. But when you were talking, I was thinking that's nice because, in a way, whiskey, just like literature, are part of Irish story, are part of your culture and stuff. It's not just a liquid. It's not just something that you drink.
It's storytelling. It's been, been in Dublin or Ireland, and you know that you go into the pub, wherever it is in the world, in Ireland, and it's about the story. So you're having your drink, be it a pint, be it whiskey, and somebody next to you who you don't know turns around and starts talking to you, and all of a sudden they're telling you stories. And next thing, somebody is singing a song, and they're telling a story. It's storytelling, and the whiskeys just sit so well together.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I know. Between the two, I think the writer's tears is you blew my mind when you with that, because it's really. I think that sometimes for marketing reasons, you many labels just they attach themselves to whatever it works. I don't care. I don't know. I can attach whiskey to the last rap song or whatever, as long
Yes,
as
yes,
it sells. In your
yes,
case, it's an actual link. It's not
yes.
fabricated. It's real.
Yep, 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 yep. And that's what we want, bringing real story and enjoyment. Listen, I want you and your viewers and the audience to enjoy Irish whiskey first and foremost. Discover Irish whiskey. It's bigger than just one brand. Remember that it's bigger than just one brand, and we're pushing out the profile. So we have a great range, within Riders Tears and the Irishman. There are many different expressions within that we have on offer every day, and then once or twice a year we'll bring out some specials which are just peaches, beautiful.
Yes. So what can we expect for the future from Writer's Tears and Irishman? I mean, I don't want any spoiler because actually, of course, you can't tell them. But do you have an actual road in front of you in the
we
future?
we do we do so. um well, I've got many hats. I'm the when you're a small business you have to do a lot of different things, but my favorite job is in that planning the road ahead,
Hmm.
in the experimentation. So what I'm trying here at the minute, and I'll tell you, the peated red ale cask, which is it will come out under the Irishman. I don't have enough to send to Italy, unfortunately, but it will be. It's going straight out to the. We're selling it to our friends in the Irish Whiskey Society here in Ireland, um, and that's a lovely little project. We're doing it with them. We make sure we pass on loads of value, so we don't overcharge for it, and that gives me great satisfaction. Then I have worked. I've done on the Writers' Tears side, a very interesting Canadian project where over a year ago, before COVID,
Hmm.
I spent quite a lot of time in Canada, and I have found some amazing casks. Never been used this style before for Irish whiskey, never. And we're going to bring it out in October, and I'm going to make sure you get a bottle to taste, and we will get it to Italy. It is stunning. It's very different, very very different. So I'm very excited about that one, and we've documented, finding the casks, finding the particular house, which I can't say,
Of course.
and the whole way across, getting the barrel across here. And thankfully, COVID has helped us because the barrel has had to rest. It can't be moved anyway. So, but we're going to bottle it and have it out to you for October. It's a stunner. Also, we have as part of this project, I have for Riders Tears, I have a single pot still expression coming out in the autumn as well.
Hmm.
Um, Very different, but all the time trying to, I suppose, layer our DNA onto that whiskey.
Hmm. So you one last question, then I will not take advantage of your time anymore. You mentioned COVID. COVID, of course, has made it difficult for everybody in every sector of the industry. What do you think will be the inheritance of COVID? What's between damage and maybe because I believe that for whiskey itself, it has given some positive things because with the blooming of tasting online, what I've noticed that's that especially for the dependence label that was a big help because they got they could be nearer to the fans in a way with the testing online because they were forced to, so you could actually reach easily much more
Yes.
people.
And that played into, yes, you're right, into the small business like ourselves. That played into our hand that we could now talk to you and your audience. We could do a whiskey tasting as opposed to me getting on a plane, going to wherever, Milan, Rome, and going from bar to event. which is very expensive. So it's prohibitive for the small firm that they can only do so many of these in a year. So online is fantastic, and it's here to stay. It doesn't replace me being at Whiskey Live in Italy and meeting you and some great whiskey people. It doesn't stop that. Uh, the big the big thing for us, the big positive was that more people are shopping locally. So in their villages and towns,
Mhm.
they're going to the local. In France, they say the caviste, and I don't know what you call them in Italy, but the caviste, the independent wine and
Ah, okay.
spirit.
Hmm.
Yeah, so they're going to their local as opposed to the supermarket, and they're saying, "Well, I'm not. I can't go to the bar or restaurant. I've a few extra dollars here or a few extra euros. I'm gonna spend it on a really nice bottle once a week, treat myself." And they're so we have had a fantastic uplift. We don't typically sell in supermarkets, but we are in the independents and those specialist wine and spirit shops. So that's where your people are spending a little bit more time and they're treating themselves, and we've had a lovely uplift in that.
Hmm.
So that that was the big win for us. Online sales as well.
Hmm.
So we're now more available, and so across Europe you can go online. And so I know in Italy we don't have that particular expression of the Irishman or Red Tears, but I can find here. It's in Germany. They're going to send it to me. Yeah, it's going to cost me €6 extra, but I get my special bottle. So they are two big positives. And the pandemic. No, nobody does win out of pandemic. It's a terrible thing, and I would say travel retail. So we've done a lot with the duty free shops. It's a great window for our brands to get seen in the world. That's gone, all
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
And just to let you know, the impact for us, it was our third biggest market. It's gone. So c'est la vie. We deal with that. The bar restaurants we all know, of course, but for us, the bar restaurant business is a harder business. It's more suited to the big multinationals because they can control what's on the back bar.
Mhm.
We do work with the bars, but it's a harder business. Some people say it's a revolving door. I'm just out of the bar, and next thing, the big multinational guy walks in and takes me off and puts. So that's it.
Yes, I know, because I've talked with some distributor here. They have the same exact problem. It's very hard, yeah, because sometimes unless you find a bar owner which is very open-minded, they always want the usual labels because they are not actually capable of selling them because
Yeah,
they are not really expert about, because you must love the whiskey to sell whiskey. You
yeah,
just can
yeah,
treat it as something I have on the shelf.
yeah, yeah. No, it's only specialist outlets, and I remember back in the early 2000s in New York and going to bars like employees only. They were sort of boutique bars, hidden a bit left of center, and they were for people in the bar trade where they go and drink, and they wanted to discover. They had time, and it was almost the more time that the bartender spent with these unusual bottlings and expressions, the better. But they are far and few between, and they're rare. So yeah, it's harder. Then I suppose the big negative of the pandemic is for maybe we're a blossoming category here, but there's lots of small startups,
Hmm.
and they may you could have got your timing wrong in bringing out a brand. So if you brought a brand in a new label in 2019, well, you've had no opportunity to get that working for you. So now it's great. Well, how deep are your pockets? How much cash have you to keep going? So that's unfortunately we'll probably see some casualties there. But that's probably the normal ebb and flow of business. No matter what line you're in, we're going to see a bit of that across all industries.
Yes, of course. And then I was thinking that, of course, the COVID, the pandemic has hit everybody, but your cousins from Scotland had also the Brexit that hit them very hard. So, I mean, that's one advantage of being inside the European Union.
Yes, exactly. And our poor cousins in Scotland, they had two things to deal with. So they had Brexit to deal with, and they also had the tariffs in the US to deal with.
Mm.
Whereas the Irish whiskey,
Yeah.
with the exception of northern whiskies, with the Irish whiskies in general, didn't have that to worry about. And one thing to note, and the tariffs got it wrong, but in Ireland we are united in
Hmm.
whiskey, north, south, east, and west of this island. We are one. We have one whiskey association. We have one category, which is wonderful. And we've had many troubles in the past, but here is one great example of how we all work together.
Yes, and that's the strength, I believe, of Irish whiskey in itself. Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. Okay, thank you, Bernard, a lot for your time. It was really interesting. Now I can take out of my mind October now for because of you. I keep thinking, okay, in October is gonna take out the thing about that cask in Canada that he found. Okay, now I will start counting the days. I don't care about summer. I hope that summer ends very quickly. We got straight to autumn. Again, thanks a lot for your time. I think I hope that
Absolutely.
to
Right.
see you live sooner or later.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Listen, lovely, lovely to speak with you and your lovely audience, and we can't wait yet to get over and have a few tushgons. I know you're used to saying drams, but the real Gaelic for drams is tushgon, which we
Tashkon,
say.
okay.
So we got to get there's a as part of spreading the word about Irish whiskies. We've also got to get some real Gaelic back into the thing.
Absolutely, totally agree. Okay, thank you again. See you soon, Bernard.
Ciao, ciao, ciao. Bye,
Thank
bye.
you. Bye.